Hey everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here, Amazon best-selling author of Inside Out Health. Let's talk a little bit about autoimmunity. So many of you have asked what's hot in the literature, and of course it's immune, but without question, autoimmunity. Great article that I read just recently really spoke to the idea of autoimmunity in that it was in Nature's Reviews Immunology, April 12th, 2021. It spoke to the idea of defective epithelial barriers linked to, are you ready for this? 2 billion chronic diseases. Now, interesting that when patients come in, I speak all about the idea of preventing autoimmunity by removing the triggers and rebuilding the barriers and testing barrier permeability. If it's too permeable versus semi-permeable, is it broken? And to speak to that. Now, this article, once again, and I strongly recommend that the abstract is free online. It is a must read. It really encapsulates in a very short article everything that we speak about. It was reprinted in Science Daily. So let's dig in and let's talk about what they refer to as the epithelial barrier hypotheses. Number one, mine exposure to toxins and chemicals will damage the epithelium. Now, when we talk about chemicals, we live in toxins, we live in a toxic world. We're exposed to more and more toxins, and not only just toxins, but pathogens, chemicals that are in the house, chemicals that are in my office. As much as we try and keep it chemical free, we've got, I don't know if you guys can see me, the walls, it's a natural paint. It doesn't have any toxin, doesn't have any chemicals. The carpeting is special. I can remember going through it with the landlord when we built the place out. He was like, where are you getting this all from? And we do the best we can. We have air filters going through the office. So you really want to limit your exposure to toxins and chemicals, both males, females, and how about those who are pregnant? You really want to decrease that. We'll go into a little bit more detail on the specific toxic and chemicals, individuals, things that you really want to avoid as we go through this Facebook Live. Defective epithelial barriers are linked to a rise in almost, and I'm going to say it again, 2 billion allergic, autoimmune, neurodegenerative, and psychiatric diseases. So the barrier, or when we refer to barrier, really referring to your gut barrier. 80% of your immune cells are in your gut. It's where your macro and micronutrients are absorbed. And it's not just that idea of leaky gut. It can be leaky gut, dysbiosis, the unleavening of good and bad bacteria, endotoxemia, the release of lipopolysaccharide, which holds gram-negative bacteria on the inside of the wall, but it's attached to the outside of the wall. And now you really have to throw in leaky gut versus SIBO and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. 46% of people who have SIBO also have Parkinson's. So we can twist it and say those who have Parkinson's, 46% have SIBO. So and we'll get into this, all the neurodegenerative diseases that you see out there have, for the most part, at least a gut component, and up to about 50%. And most of them have a main contributory gut component. So the hypotheses may provide an explanation to why allergies, autoimmune diseases have increased recently. And I like to throw in there food sensitivities. So for me, what I've seen with the barriers, your gut being too permeable, a much higher incidence in the vastness, the array, the number of food sensitivities, and the positivity rate amongst my patients. We're not becoming a healthier population. We are becoming a much unhealthier population. So a lot of these defective epithelial barriers are linked to an increase in the usage of what we refer to as the Western diet, or the SAD diet, the standard American diet. Our diet is too high in processed foods. It's too high in sugar. It's too high in the consumption of gluten, dairy, and lectins. So when I say that, a lot of patients, well, what's left? There's so many things that are left. There's a plethora of foods that you can choose from. In that, there's a lot of fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of obvious within that plant-based diet. You also can get your wild smash fish, your organic type of eggs, cage-free, your grass-fed meats. There's a lot to choose from. I don't adhere to any one diet. What I try and avoid is the standard American diet. The average American consumes 160 pounds of sugar per year, 146 pounds of wheat, and 142 pounds of artificial sweetener. That's just one person. So without question, it's junk, trash, and all the above. We've really got to go back to eating wholesome foods and a much better diet. Increased exposure to toxins. It was studied in 2012, and it's increased since then, that America has 3.63 billion toxins that are in chemicals that are dropped in the food, water, in the air. We are without question the most toxic country in the world. And we also, if I could kick in, we take too many drugs. We're about 4.25% of the world's population, and we're about 80% of the prescription drugs, 80% of opioids, and about 52% of the prescription drugs. Microplastics, let's just go right for it. Phthalates and BPA. BPA can damage down to 3 different generations. BPA are very detrimental to women's overall health. They're estrogen mimickers. Women have a lot of estrogen problems. They're not able to detox it. They're not able to detox estrogen. And what you see is a higher incidence of PMS, breast cancer, and many different problems that are typically associated with females. Phthalates, you can get phthalates in fast food. You can go into an organic store and they can give you phthalates in plastic. So we really want to avoid and decrease our incidence and exposure to microplastics. Household cleaning agents. We use Natural in the house. They're natural organic ingredients. Most people don't. They're bi and trilingual also. So it's a great way of kicking your Spanish and French up. But more so than that, it gives you the ability to decrease the amount of toxic exposure. The more toxins that we have, the more unhealthy we are. And typically, the higher our body fat is. And literature has also indicated an increase in diabetes and blood sugar dysregulation. Just as an aside, to speak to the increased obesity, why do people get heavy when they're exposed to toxins? Because we overload our liver. Fat cells are depositories for toxins. So when you have no more space in your current fat cells, but you're still getting more of a toxic overload because your liver can't detox it, what does the body have to do? It has to lay down and expand the size of the fat cells. So you have more reservoir for toxins. So without question, you want to limit your toxins. You want to watch at home your household cleaning agents. Pesticides, we kind of touched upon that before. The 3 items in America today that are most filled with pesticides are cotton, tobacco, and good old American Java. Emulsifiers, just emulsifiers alone. Yesterday I was shopping. I was looking for I was looking at a chocolate pudding thing, and in the chocolate pudding it had xylitol. I'm not really happy. It was organic. It claimed it was keto. I brought it just to examine it at home, and we were looking at it, and it was like 9 grams of carbs with no fat. We weren't really sure how it was keto, but it had an emulsifier. These emulsifiers are extraordinarily ruinous to your overall health, and just emulsifiers alone can damage your gut and lead you down a precipitous path of failing health and leaky gut. Exhaust fumes. Walk around with me outside New York City or any kind of metropolitan city. You're going to get a lot of fumes. You're also going to get a lot of chimney fumes. And of course, cigarette smoke also poses an issue. So any of these chemicals, exhaust and such, are also leading to toxic overload. And just to reiterate, the chemicals, 3.63 billion, are in the air, food, and water. So what happens when your epithelium damages to the skin mucosal barriers? What does it lead to? Well, as I said earlier, allergic conditions, food sensitivities, inflammatory bowel disorders. There was just an article that came out yesterday that each of the last 2 decades, we've had a 5 to 8% increase in irritable bowel disorder. And it's not from testing, it's people having more and more gut problems. Also, there's been an increase in celiac disease. These diseases are attributed to changes in our microbiome because our gut is the epicenter of our health. Our gut is the communication center of our health because it communicates in a millicenter with our brain. That's a little ad. We're seeing more autoimmune issues. How do we get these autoimmune issues? Well, our gut, or our small intestine, is supposed to filter just small digested food particles, nutrients, and water. When it becomes too permeable or leaky, or tight junctions open up, undigested food particles, and this is the secret sauce, the undigested food particles pass the barrier, go into the bloodstream. Our immune system goes on alert. When it sees these undigested food particles, unfortunately for us, these undigested food particles get attacked by our immune system. So initially we get localized inflammation. If this continues, we'll probably get systemic inflammation because it circulates through the body, and ultimately over an excessive amount of onslaught of too many undigested food particles, the immune system will get confused and start looking at the protein sequence of the food and see which structure, internal structure or joint, part of the brain, whatever it may be, looks very similar in protein structure and start to attack it, i.e. we have this increase in autoimmunity. The bulk of our autoimmunity comes from undigested food particles and the barrier issues. So remember, I talked about the two things when a patient comes in is I try and understand and look at the trigger of inflammation, the trigger of autoimmunity, and the status of our barriers. Metabolic disorders are also on the increase because of changes in our microbiome. Metabolic disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, obesity, and the like, and neurodegenerative diseases. As I alluded to earlier, we spoke about the idea of the gut and the brain being intertwined. Neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, autism, ADHD, and Parkinson's are on the rise because of the compromise of your epithelial barriers. So this article did a great job. It also had some strong recommendations. And I thought really these recommendations would give you robust outcomes in that prevention and intervention suggestions. They said therapeutic approaches should focus on, number one, strengthening tissue-specific barriers. And you do so, in my opinion, if you follow my 7R program. So my 7R program, and there are derivatives of this. There's 4R, there's 5R. Actually, my 7 is now becoming an 8R. So let's talk about strengthening the tissue-specific barriers. You do so by resetting your lifestyle. Real simple. Eating a good diet, taking gluten out, taking dairy out, taking any food sensitivities out, getting some exercise, having some stress relief. Number two, replace. Replace what? Digestive enzymes, stomach acids, pancreatic enzymes, and bile, all great choices. You can also remove, and you would want to remove specific bad bacteria. In that removal process, you would use things like oregano oil, aromatic oils, berberine, garlic, and serum bovine immunoglobulin. The big thing about strengthening tissue-specific barriers would be to regenerate. You would use specific nutrients and supplemental ideas within a great diet, whether it's a keto diet, a Mediterranean diet, a diet that is individualized and personalized for you to help build and heal and regenerate, heal and seal the gut lining. And then, of course, you would reinoculate with good bacteria and also pre and probiotics. Retest to see if those food sensitivities that you had before the program were after. I'm a big proponent of testing, not guessing. And ultimately, you would have a changed lifestyle, one that you would enjoy in that you would retain your overall health. Another suggestion they made was blocking bacteria. Again, you would block the specific bacteria from being expressed going through the gut itself. You'd also block the bacteria. The house of bacteria in your body is in your colon and large intestine. Your small intestine should not have a lot of bacteria. In that bacteria, or if you get a lot of bacteria in the small intestine, leads you down this path called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Now, what's most interesting is 20 some odd years ago when I was in school, we heard the whisper of leaky gut. Now, any class I go to and I talk about it, we know it, we accept it. There's over 5,000 articles published in peer-reviewed journals on increased intestinal permeability, about 500 journals that actually call it leaky gut. SIBO, in the field, we all know about it, but SIBO is now growing in the populace. So without question, I believe that your time, which is now, your leaky gut will be SIBO. So you want to block the bacteria from passing the gut lining. You also want to block the bacteria from going from the large to the small intestine. You also want to avoid colonization by pathogens. You don't want to have this beautiful, hospitable gut region, this ecosystem that allows pathogens to live, allow pathogens to host there. And lastly, you want dietary measures for improved microbiome. It's all about your gut. So I'm a big proponent that it's not just about your gut health. It's about your gut health. It's about your bacterial health. It's about your viruses, your parasites. It's an ecosystem. It's a neighborhood. And you want to keep a good health promoting neighborhood. And lastly, they suggest avoid or reducing exposure to harmful substances and toxic products. Again, that goes into lifestyle. So once again, we're seeing article after article after article really speaking to the idea of how important keeping your gut in its pristine condition, trying to avoid leaky gut, i.e. increased intestinal permeability, trying to avoid SIBO, and there's multiple other things that we could talk about in the gut. But this article, once again, in Nature Reviews Immunology, April 12th, is a great starting point, and I recommend it strongly. So I see some... Hey, Scott. I see Scott. Hey, looking good. Thanks a lot, Scott. I appreciate that. What does overimmunity do to vaccines? Well, interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the vaccine. So there's this argument, vaccine or not vaccine, and I'm not jumping in that rabbit hole. I tell everybody, and I would be very happy if you could do me a favor, give me an I if you want me to talk about immunity, in that we can speak to the idea of talking about the 4 types of patients that will come in my office right now. There's the patient who hasn't had COVID and hasn't been vaccinated or vaccinated. There's the patient that has had COVID-19. And in that COVID-19, there's a break between the idea of they're not having any post-COVID issues and or they're long hauling, which is a major issue. There's also that third person who hasn't had COVID but has been vaccinated. And there's the fourth person who's had COVID-19 and been vaccinated. So I will be compelled to share with all my patients out there and doctors that each and every one of them needs something slightly different, but immunity without question is the conversation piece. For me, it is the new paradigm of our healthcare. Whether we can mask or not mask and all this other thing, we know that immunity is critical. And part of the reason that we have a poor immune system is nobody really takes care of it. 72 to 75% of Americans are overweight or obese, 42% are obese, 12% are metabolically active. It poses a major, major issue. So my suggestion is, without question, to start taking care of your immune system. I see Timothy Kelly saying aye. So I don't know. We'll talk about the vaccine. We'll talk about what it does. We'll talk about the differences. We'll talk about COVID-19 and the long haulers. I'm very happy to do that. Hey, Shanae, how are you? How scary, how toxic we are. Yeah, we're full of toxins. And I owe you an email back, Shanae. I've written it 3 times and I never press send. And every time I come back to it. So I owe you an email. But I'm compelled by the fact that you've decided to, and I'll answer it right now. I'll answer it for you because you're watching. I'm compelled that you've decided that health is wealth, and also you want to share your life's experience. So my suggestion is work for your own and learn from others. So nothing's better than working for your own. If you're health and you can work for your own and still learn from others, you've got the trifecta, if you will. Have you found a pattern of GI issues related to fluoride? Absolutely the same thing, in that the idea of the fluoride is very damaging to the overall gut health. And that's a great question. And I'm going to actually, with that question, I'm going to write a little blog on that and post it. So in the next couple of days, please look for that. Hey, Wendy, how are you? Very interesting. Wendy does a great job with me. We're working in Aconia. So we might as well take that time period now. I'll be in it's June 5th and 6th. I'll be in Boston. I'll be teaching a Aconia laser seminar. We're doing some hands-on, and we're going to mix it with some great nutritional conversations on gut, on brain, on Alzheimer's, on SIBO, and the like. You're welcome, Cynthia. Thank you so much for it. Shanae, I answered your question. Timothy Kelly, you put the eye up. It's always my pleasure. I love to keep these little conversations to 15 or 20 minutes. Do me a favor. Please share it. Let everybody know what we're talking about. Also, let me know if you see it on Memorex. Put an eye up if you want me to talk about immunity. And if you have any other topics you'd love me to cover, I'm happy to do so. So it's my pleasure once again. Everybody, stay healthy. Take care of your health. Remember, what have you done for the guts lately? Do you have the guts to be healthy? I'm Dr. Rob Silverman, always yours in health.